On December 10th, 1989, a free Czechoslovakia was formed. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was regarded by many as the most powerful country in the world, and Czechoslovakia was not.
Before the revolution, people were living under a communist regime. They didn't have a lot of flexibility for buying food in the supermarket. They didn't have a lot of flexibility for what kind of jobs they could have. They didn't have the ability to go and study what they wanted to.
So, they decided to confront and fight to earn the freedom from dictators who had controlled them. The powerless people of Czechoslovakia took a stand against the most powerful communist country ever, peacefully, to start the end of communist control. Czechoslovak citizens stood against the invasion of the Warsaw Five in 1968, which inserted Soviet Union control into the complex post-World War II government of Czechoslovakia. In the 1989 Velvet Revolution, the Czechoslovak people peacefully ended the authoritarian communist rule of their country. The Warsaw Pact was formed through a need for the smaller Central and Eastern European countries who wanted military support from a rearmed West Germany. The Soviet Union saw this as an excuse to form a militarized group to rival the North Atlantic Treaty Organization after the requests to join NATO were rejected multiple times. The members' militaries did not need to be mobilized very often, but their biggest mobilization was in 1968 to quell the Prague Spring. By 1968, the common Czechoslovak was getting tired of the relentless control of their freedoms by the communist leaders, such as curfews put in place, taking the right to vote from specific people, even taking their land and property. My grandfather, Paul Zajabal, a Czechoslovak refugee, stated in an email interview, "My mother had several acres of farmland where we raised potatoes, corn, and sweet beets. The communists stole her fields, took a milk cow we had at home. She was forced to work in fields for communist agriculture enterprise. They also imprisoned people for no clear reason. As my grandfather also says, my brother tried to cross the border when he was 17 years old. He was captured by the guards, and as punishment he was sent 3 years in jail by working at Yakimov uranium mines digging uranium for Soviet nuclear arsenal. He received probably a high dose of radiation while working there, and he died when he was 38 years old. On January 5th of that year, Alexander Dubček was put into office as Czechoslovakia's president and secretary of the KSC, the Czechoslovak Communist Party. Dubček and his allies set to work trying to create socialism with a human face, as Dubček stated to the people. He wanted to liberate the country from parts of communism to get the people to support the Communist Party. However, it backfired. The Prague Spring was a series of reforms that angered the Warsaw Pact countries. These reforms caused 5 other Warsaw Pact countries, otherwise known as the Warsaw Five, to combine their militaries and invade. A few days earlier, the USSR, East Germany, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Czechoslovakia executives had signed the Bratislava Declaration, essentially pledging their loyalty to communism. However, the talks proved unsatisfactory to the Soviets, and Prague was invaded by the Warsaw Five with 500,000 troops the night of August 21st, 1968. The Soviets had predicted Czechoslovakia would fall in 4 days. However, the invasion lasted 8 months. This was caused by peaceful opposition by the people. For example, once a deployment from Poland did a full loop through a town and was returned to their country because of the altered road signs and citizens giving wrong directions. This shows how anyone could take a stand, even against the most powerful communist country of all time. The period after the Prague Spring was a renewal of communism, where the new secretary, Gustav Husak, reversed all of Dubček's reforms, removed all of his accomplices in the Prague Spring and liberal members of the Communist Party, and tried to restore relationships with the other communist bloc countries to assure that their government was still communist. There were also some rules made. Political statements by mainstream media and people not seen as political leaders were banned. Eventually, the citizens slowly ebbed away back to a quiet existence and their repetitive lives. This invasion and their descent illustrated that powerless people could fight the most powerful country in Europe, and soon they were getting restless again just in time for the revolutions of 1989. In 1989, the Soviet Union was losing their hold on their subsidiaries in the Warsaw Pact countries. Tensions were very high. There were revolutions and revolutionary leaders in all of the Communist bloc countries, such as Lech Wałęsa in Poland, Erich Honecker in East Germany, and Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel was a playwright, author, and poet. He wrote over 40 pieces of literature. but he was best known for being the leader of the Velvet Revolution and the last president of Czechoslovakia and the first of the Czech Republic. 26 different countries, including the USA, gave him awards for his role in bringing down the USSR. He received literature awards for his outstanding philosophical views on peace and freedom. He was the one who finished the USSR's hold on the Warsaw Pact countries and their subsidiaries. He was the one who led the Velvet Revolution. The Velvet Revolution started with a march on November 17, 1989, to honor the 50th anniversary of Jan Opletal's death, a student who was killed for protesting the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel and the leaders of the march had reached an agreement with the communist leaders of Czechoslovakia on a route through Prague ending at Vyšhrad Cemetery, but the students participating decided to continue down towards downtown Prague, which the communists had not allowed on the route. After marching through downtown, they arrived at a town square to see police decked out in riot gear blocking their path forward. After waiting, the police proceeded to violence and started beating the protesters. After the police and protesters cleared away, there was one person remaining, Ludwig Zivkak. People had seen Zivkak lying upon the ground, and the rumor quickly spread that the police had killed a person. The rumors spread, and as they spread, they warped, eventually saying that the government had killed a person. This sparked outrage and in a way started the end of communist control. In other words, is just what Václav Havel needed. The Velvet Revolution was one of a few revolutions in the Soviet bloc countries. Just 2 weeks earlier in East Germany, the Berlin Wall, which had separated the free from the oppressed in Europe for more than 2 decades, had fallen, causing many subjugated East Germans to escape to the free West. In Poland, it was a series of strikes, starting with the biggest strike of them all, which was aimed at the coal mines near the Czechoslovak border. Hungary fought the USSR by taking down their wall with Free Austria, unstabilizing multiple countries, including Czechoslovakia, by thousands escaping through Hungary. All 3 countries had established democratic governments, so that left Czechoslovakia as one of the few countries still under the control of communism. However, the countries that had switched to democracy had angered the USSR, so they tightened their hold on Czechoslovakia, not being able to lose Czechoslovakia to the free West. Václav Havel needed something big. The images of the first march and the beatings had been released to the West. The Westerners were shocked at how the protesters were treated, and world leaders called out the USSR to stop this treatment. Achieving the attention of the Western powers was a victory. Havel, however, needed to end the dictatorship. If this rebellion failed, there might not be any other chance to top the USSR. So, Václav Havel inspired the citizens to become more and more involved. After the first march, there were boycotts and some small marches every day, but not many people participated in these. Except on November 25th, there were protests on the streets, or more specifically, in front of the government's headquarters. The numbers were really what made the march big. Estimated numbers say the protesters peaked at 800,000 people. To put that in perspective, 800,000 people is about the same as the entire state of Alaska or the city of San Francisco coming to march in protest of the government, which had controlled them for so long. This had massive implications on the Velvet Revolution. This told the dictators that people were done with restrictions on their freedoms. This is one of the biggest marches of all time. After an incomprehensible amount of people pledged support against the oppressors, the government did not hold out very much longer. 2 days after this march, there was a 2-hour general strike where 75% of the population boycotted their jobs. And another 2 days later, the Federal Assembly abolished the provision in the Constitution that stated the Communist Party had to dominate the government. 2 weeks later, the first public elections in 41 years were conducted, and the first government not dominated by the Communist Party was sworn into the Federal Assembly, and finally, just before the close of the year, playwright and political dissident Václav Havel was elected as the final president of Czechoslovakia, and after the Velvet split, or the peaceful splitting of Czechoslovakia into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, he became the first president of the Czech Republic.
In my opinion, he was a very positive person in Czech politics.
The Czechs and Slovaks have really been forgotten, and most people still call them Czechoslovakia. But the rebellion in Czechoslovakia can show you how even the most powerless people can unite together and throw down the most powerful communist empire ever. But the rebellions still impact today, such as the Arab Spring, which was styled after the Prague Spring.
Well, I think people in the Czech Republic are very proud of the Velvet.
This simple sitting outside Prague Castle or taking 2 hours of your job to protest really shows how you have a voice, but the effect is multiplied by hundreds or thousands when you do it together. Taking a stand together really can topple the most oppressive government in history.